and I think you have to hit a
She
button.
brought a
Hi.
couple of
Yeah, I
chairs.
did
You guys have a
grab some
seat.
chairs if you wanted to sit down and hang out.
This is the camera?
Mm-hmm. Hey, guys.
Hey guys!
Morning.
What was that noise you
That
just
was an
made?
imitation of you.
Oh, goodness. Oh, Isaac. Well, it doesn't say anything, but I need you to take the YouTube chat down because it's in front of my Twitch chat now.
Well, you don't want to have nothing in front of your Twitch chat.
No, I do not. That is...
I hate that when something gets in front of
All right, there we go. Oh, no, it's back.
his
There we
Twitch
went.
chat.
There it is.
There
Oh.
we are.
Okay, but now the screen is gone. I don't know. There it is. Alrighty.
We're back.
Welcome to the show, guys. I got my two old men here, and we're going to talk about leather. And I actually have two other old men over here in the audience, so we're just full of it today. It's going to be a fun one.
Got that right for a change.
So this is a continuation of our Leather 101 series that we started last week. I only got 2 chairs. Can you go upstairs and grab one more?
Yep.
Thank you very much. Oh, you guys are fine. So where are you guys from? We'll
so
just say
far,
hey real
all
fast.
we've established is that you're full of it.
That's correct. That's correct.
Mississippi.
From Mississippi. All 3 of you? Well, how fun.
Okay, now one of you's from Mississippi. The other one's from Mississippi. Is one married and one's not? That's the deal.
I'm just further south.
You lose eyes the further south you get. Is that what? Starts to shrink. All
Those
right.
Syllables.
Syllables. The syllables?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did a couple of these episodes last year just talking about leather in general, and they went over really well. People enjoy listening to us talk about leather for some reason. I don't know.
Because they want to know about it. They're going to spend money to buy it. They want to know what they're buying.
That's right. So I figured today we would kind of talk about the different leather finishes, maybe somewhat how they're accomplished, what it means for the piece of leather, whether or not, is a piece of patent leather considered fake leather or is it fine?
Did you just say leather or not?
Correct. Leather or not? Did I? Whether?
Okay.
I might have said leather or not. That's really the only word that's in my head. So Kevin, why don't you tell us about leather?
This is leather.
It is. I
This
tried
comes
to
from various animals
Mm-hmm.
of various genetic makeup, which makes an incredible difference when it comes to what you're able to do with the poor critter's skin.
That is true.
You know it's true. See, I'm not as full of it as you are.
That's true. I should have grabbed a piece of kangaroo.
Well, there's one back there,
I
but
do.
it's
I do
huge.
have a few over there, in that roll. You wanna throw that roll up on the table? That brown roll, just right there. That big one. Yep.
Yeah, this is
that thing.
nothing's free around here.
So, well,
That
and I
is
think
a pile of kangaroo.
it is. It just came yesterday. So
Really?
yeah, Rusty brought it in after we finished live shopping last night, and he asked if I'd seen it, and I said
Oh,
no,
my goodness.
no, sir, I have not seen this. So we got in some number 2 skins from Birdsall.
Wow.
So for you live shoppers out there, this will be probably on live shopping next week. FYI.
Boy,
They
they're
look
pretty.
huge.
They're pretty.
And they look good,
Mm-hmm.
which is really nice.
Yeah, it's those nice ochre brown colors.
Well, and buying what those folks call number 2 is always a happy deal.
It is. It sure is. All right. Well, so let's talk about the critters that you could get leather from.
Well, pick on a big one.
A cow.
Okay, that's pretty big.
You want me to go bigger?
Well, no,
Okay.
cow's big enough. You can go bigger, but cows are fine. Cow's probably the most common leather that's thought of when when you think of leather,
Especially in our part of the world.
kind of think
Yeah.
cowhide, and there is
Maybe if you're in India, you don't think about cowhide. You think about water buffalo.
you
Yeah,
get
lizard.
shocked you start thinking about cowhide. Anyway, so you can do a lot with cowhide. You can make it thin.
Mm-hmm.
You can make it. It starts out very, very,
Very
very
thick.
thick. What would you say? A half inch, 5/8?
Yeah,
Mhm.
in places, yes.
Yeah, because we actually get harness leather, old world harness, which Herman Oak holds the secret formula to and won't release it from their crampy little fingers for anything. And we'll get that stuff that's 25, 26 ounces.
It makes
up around
it makes the dial on the gauge go back around again.
Yeah. So they have the ability to do so many things to cowhide. Like for one thing, you can plump it up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can take a cowhide and just aside from all the technical stuff and getting it to a side, you know, they gotta, for the most part, it's sides for our world. And then they can split it, make sure it's level, get it to the thickness they want. And then from that point, you can do all kinds of stuff, just a myriad of things. Perhaps you would like to.
As far as what you can do with just the cowhide
Yeah.
itself after it's split.
Once it's been split,
Well, you can emboss it.
okay, that's one. You can emboss it, you can leave it plain.
Mm-hmm.
You can put it in a tumbler and what do they call that when it? Yeah,
And mill it.
mill it.
Yeah,
yes.
you can, and
Make
you
it
can.
softer.
The nice thing
Yes.
about it is, just to touch on that one point, you can put it in one of those giant barrels and turn it around and around and around, which is called milling, and you can put it in there for a minute, or 5 minutes, or a half an hour. The changes are incredible.
Yep.
You put it in there for a minute or 2 minutes, whatever the case. Yeah, and your grain is still pretty smooth and tacked. It's not pebbled, and it's kind of firmish. Could be kind of firmish. You put it in there for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes or whatever. You're going to come out with more of a crunched up
yeah.
leather, pebble grain type thing.
You're gonna start to get some texture on it, maybe.
Yeah, you get some real different grain there.
It also breaks down the hand of it too, doesn't it?
Oh, it
As
certainly
far as
does.
how firm it is.
Yeah, what's really crazy is that this leather here this is a piece of Herman oak, isn't it?
It sure is.
You can squish it. This is some of their waterproof stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think I
So
before.
while it's in that drum, tumbling and tumbling around, they put a teaspoonful of secret stuff in there, or a
Secret
cup
sauce.
full of
Secret stuff.
secret stuff, and it comes out water resistant, or
Mm-hmm.
it comes out something else. And you can take this leather, this good old hard, well, it's not hard, but firmish leather, and tumble it and have it come out.
Yeah, I mean, you got like this. This has been
That's a
probably.
better example.
Yeah, this is a good tumble. You've got, and you can always tell a tumbled leather versus an embossed leather. So this one is embossed. The grain is consistent all the way across the hide. It's probably been tumbled and embossed because it's quite thin, but it's a very consistent looking pebble. Where this one, you see that you have a tighter pebble or less of pebble towards the spine
back.
of the hide. And then on the edges in the belly where the grain and the fibers are looser, you have a much, you have more texture because it was
more
able to
of a
crunch it.
natural look,
Mhm.
really.
Yeah,
This is
Yeah.
a nice piece of leather.
it is a nice piece of
I
leather.
hate the color.
It's your very nice putty chap leather.
Yeah, but it is a nice piece of leather.
Yes.
Putty.
look
And that's
pretty.
the thing, that's one of the things that's difficult for us, for me in particular, because, I tend to think of leather kind of like that. I like,
Mhm.
a natural nature.
Good old
natural
distressed oil.
that's just the way I think. This
earth
stuff,
tones, yeah.
I think is leather, this stuff I think is leather, this stuff I think is, well, it's leather, but not my favorite color.
Well, so let's talk about so you have grain, right? But then you have where no grain, so you
What
could
is
have
that?
a suede. So this is some of
Oh, this
the
is that Whistler.
This is Whistler, and I brought it in compared to our double butts that we have on our Chapin seating because this Whistler suede, which
And
is still
by
a
the way,
suede.
this was made on purpose, this
Right.
way.
So this looks like the very bottom of the hide that they split off, and that looks like a center split, if I am not mistaken.
Could very well be.
Because this is definitely
But
flanky
they
and
made
fleshy.
it look like this on purpose.
Yeah, because this is the right side, correct? Because the
Right.
stamp is on the
That's-
other side,
that's
which I
right.
was confused about also yesterday.
Yeah. So here it is, this pretty, amazing looking piece of leather.
Amazing.
But they make it look like that on purpose for a reason. And that is something that a lot of people just do not understand, most of our customers do not understand that why leather happens. You know, I mean, they get the fact that leather comes from a cow and you make leather out of it. That's pretty much the basic reason. But why we even have leather as customers, you could pick why we have it and why customers have it. Comes down to two reasons, maybe three, I haven't counted recently. But one reason is that we call the tannery and say, we want 2,000 feet of this or that.
Mhm.
And they go to their leather catalog and they say, well, okay, we don't make that anymore, but we can make something like this. Okay, how much do you want? Well, new leather. I really don't want a whole drum load. That's 2,000 feet. I'd like to have 500 feet. There's an issue. That is an issue. It depends on how good of friends we are with that tanner as to whether or not he's going to say, okay, we'll make you 500 feet, Kevin, and if it works, next time you can buy a drum load.
Mhm.
Okay. Not everybody can do that.
And the reason is because they're wasting
Yeah, everything.
that part of that drum that they could have made more money on.
Well,
Yep.
and also, like, the formulas for tanning leather are very specific, and they calculate them for drum loads.
Yeah.
Like, when they run them, they need the drum to be a certain amount full so that it processes the leather correctly. So
Yeah.
they'll have, like, sample drum sizes, and they'll be able to do us 500 feet in a sample drum, or maybe they'll run,
If
you know,
they have one
250.
available.
Correct, if they have one available. And so, you know, once you get to that larger drum, you have to run a certain amount of footage, otherwise it doesn't make the leather right.
Right, and many of those tanners, they're willing to work with us.
Mhm.
Some will tan us 300 feet of something, but when they do, and then you switch to a full drum load,
It can be a
it's
little,
not necessarily going to be the same.
Because of the recipe.
Yeah.
you were just
Exactly.
talking
Yeah.
about.
It's so hard to do that. That's why
especially with
tanning-
oil tans.
Yeah,
Especially
the tanning
with oil
methods are
tans.
secret. You know, they have been for centuries, and it's all because of that. So that's one reason we have leather, is because somebody like us or Tandy or whoever can call and say, we'd like 1,000 feet of this or 10,000 feet of that or whatever. The other reason that our customers are able to have leather, and especially such a choice of variety.
As I say, almost everything on this table is odd lot with the exception of like 3 things.
And well, so define odd lot.
Odd lot is something that we do not order a specific, we are not going to a tannery saying, I want 2,000 feet of this one leather. We go to a tannery and say, what are your samples, overruns, drums that came out the wrong color because the formula didn't quite take or
so
something was
let's
weird.
explain that.
And then they have a leather that they don't make leather for fun.
No,
I mean, they do
that's
like
a big,
samples.
That's a big point. So we'll back up a minute and talk about that. The only reason tanneries make leather is because there's 2 reasons. Number one, they want to offer a new product.
Mhm.
So they have to tan something that they're so confident that they can replicate. They make X amount of leather and they put it in catalogs, they give it to their representatives, and they take it around and show it to people. They send samples to people like us, and we say, oh yeah, I'd like that. And then there's the idiots like us that say, well, I like that, but I want it to be that color.
Right.
Ugh, that's an issue. But it's the reason they make leather is because someone has ordered it. So now, to go back to that term of stock lot or odd lot, I think that you said,
Mhm.
that's different. An odd lot and a stock lot are different things. An odd lot can be a mix of leather. That would be a mixed odd lot. But a stock lot is all the same leather. Like Bill's Tannery made 2,000 feet of this for Jane's handbag company, and Jane went out of business. Or Jane says, we got that leather in and we can't use it. We sent it back to you.
Right.
They have a stock lot of this leather, and they have nowhere to go because Jane was their only customer. She ordered 2,000 feet, and that's it. So where does that leather go? You know,
It sits on
it goes on
their
a pallet.
floor. Goes on a
It
pallet.
goes on that pallet over there, and depending
make
on
it
how high
again.
that pallet is, if it's like 18 or 20 inches high, they put another pallet on top of it or a piece of cardboard or something, because tanneries make mistakes, and sometimes
Well, it's a natural product.
of course.
It's a natural product.
So the next time they make leather, and it's not for Jane anymore because they've fixed her problem. She's all good to go. But Bill's custom knife sheaths, he needed some leather, and he got it in, and the tannery made it for him, and they said, "Oh, crap." That leather was sitting next to this machine over there, and it got metal filings all over it. And Bill ain't gonna be able to use that. So separate the good ones out, take the bad ones, put them on top of that pallet over there, and they go down the road. And this goes on day after day after day after day. And tanneries accumulate.
Well, they also have different grades of leather.
Of course,
And-
it just figures into the mix.
Right. And I mean, when you're talking about people that are buying from tanneries, you are talking about large production capability. You're talking about furniture companies that are doing lines of sofas, and they need tens
Bag
of
companies.
thousands of feet of maybe 5 different colors of this line of leather. They're going to put out, like, next spring they are making this couch in this color, and that's going to be their offer. And so the tannery then has to build that. But you're going to get like Moore and Giles has hides that come out, and they are not up to the grade of whatever furniture companies need them to be. So they take whatever amount of those skins that weren't up to snuff,
Yeah.
and they put them on that pallet.
And that's one of the things that people don't, a lot of our customers also do not understand, is the fact that you mentioned earlier, leather's not perfect because it's a natural product.
Those
But-
cows really like those fences.
The
y'all.
tannery wants to sell A-grade hides.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they want. They want to get the most money for it.
Right.
Just makes sense. But hey, that batch of cows from
Those cats over there.
Yeah.
that batch of cows from so
You
and
guys
so.
didn't hear that.
That was the one I used to buy from China. Kidding. They get a batch of leather, and it's got every single cow had a big brand right in the middle. So what grade is that?
Cat grade.
I mean, it's probably a C grade. Maybe.
Might be.
Yeah.
And they have they have 50 of them or whatever. Big brand right in the middle. So it's a C grade leather. All the leathers from veg leather, it's all tanned in the same pit. So the leather comes out, and you've got 10 A grades and 30 B grades and 80 C grades, and then you got some that are really down low on the
D's and
scale.
X's, yeah.
D's and X's, yeah. All leather's the same.
That brings up a point when I had my own saddle shop, and I would go to, say, Herman Oak Leather and say, I would like a side of leather, a side of saddle skirting. And they say, we can't sell you a side. We will sell you a roll. At that time, it was 10 sides for a roll. And that's, for some saddle makers like me, that was pretty hard to come up with, right? That's a lot of money. But they also said, what grade would you like?
Yeah.
And you had a choice of A, B, C, or D, or Tannery Run. And I would always choose Tannery Run, especially for saddles, because it had blemishes on it.
But you get a
could
good
work
mix.
around
You're
them.
going to get a mix. Yep, you're going
Yeah.
to get a couple A's, a couple B's, a couple C's.
You might get a couple of really nice sides, that are smooth, but they would all be good leather.
Well, and going back to that hide with the great big basketball
Yeah.
sized brand in the middle of it, when you cut that hide in half, like many of our customers want 10 or 12 or 13 square feet, when you cut that C grade in half and you cut through that brand and you have this much brand on the edge, what do you got?
A grade.
It's A grade leather.
Yeah.
And a lot of our customers still to this day, how many times have we been trying to educate people that this
And
is the way it is?
it's been at least a decade in
I
my.
know. And, it's the same way. If you get a D grade hide, because 6 square feet of it on the neck are just scarred up and pockmarked and terrible. And you cut off that 6 feet, what do you got left?
Probably some B or A grade.
B or A grades. And this is one of the nice things about Springfield Leather Company is the fact that we can take that 6 square feet and we can click small parts between the scars and the shapes. And some of it, we can even click right through those things because for certain products it doesn't matter.
Right.
And we can use those. So that's one of the things. Going back to your grading, on chrome tanned leathers, again, the tanners want best grade leathers to come out to their customers, right? Sell them super clean stuff, high price, it's the way to go. But we don't need that because we have a lot of customers. Man,
Well, that's just not the only thing that we need, because we do carry it,
Yeah,
but we just also carry a lot of other stuff.
right. And so when we can tell a customer, or ask the tannery rather, how much is this leather per foot? Well, it's $3.50. Whew, okay, that means we gotta sell it for 7 or close or whatever it is, $6.50 or $7.20. I don't know, but don't you have lower grades? Well, yeah. Are they less money? Yeah. Well, how much are number 2s? Well, they're $2.75. Well, what about if we get a mix of number 2s and 3s? Well, we could be at like $1.80. Oh my goodness. We can sell that same leather that we would have sold for $7 for $3.60 or $3.50 or whatever we determine we can. Makes a big difference in how we buy leather as to what the customer can pay.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're pretty good at that.
Yeah.
You know, we've been able to work with our tanneries over the years, and a lot of them never ever have thought that way. They just think, you need leather? This is leather. It's $3.50 a foot. Oh, you can use stuff with holes in it? Yeah.
Leather has holes. We like to talk about them.
Yep.
So that's how we buy leather. But let's talk about, like, what does it mean when you get a piece of suede or this kind of situation and working yourself up with the different finishes? Like, what does it mean to have leather that has a aniline finish versus a semi-aniline finish versus no finish?
Well, you tell them. You know that stuff.
So this is,
What do you want?
well, so you start out with a cowhide, right? And the cowhide is upwards of 1/2 inch thick or thicker.
Yeah.
You know, if you are making upholstery leather, if you are not Herman oak leather and you're not doing saddle skirting, but you are chrome tanning leather, okay, so we can start about that. There's a lot of tanneries. A lot of leather comes out of Mexico, Brazil, China Argentina. They process a lot of leather. And so you have a lot of facilities that strictly will take the hair off and chrome tan.
Yes.
And then they will take that product that they have gotten to what they call a wet blue, and then a finishing tannery will then acquire it, or these facilities possibly will have another segment of their business that
Yeah,
is
there's
a
some
finishing
tanneries.
tannery.
That's all they do is tan wet blue leather.
Yeah, they just create the initial product, and then other people, like SB Foot is one of them. They don't take hair-on hides from the butcher shop and start there. They get wet blues and they finish them into, you know, whatever boot leather it is that they're making. But so, once again, you start out with a piece of leather that's 1/2 inch thick. And tanneries make money on volume, and they make money
Yeah,
on...
the profit margin is only like
very
2,
small.
3%, maybe
Yeah.
4.
It's very, very small. So they need to get the most they can out of every hide that they acquire. So what they're going to do is they're going to start splitting. So they do an initial split to get most of that rough, fleshy stuff off the back, and that happens in the wet. So after it comes from the dehairing process, it goes through an initial wet split to get the really, really crummy stuff off the bottom. And then it starts going through. So after that, they can get this piece of leather down here. So this is a whole hide. I assume it might be buffalo because it's kind of a small hide. It's hard to tell because I can't see follicles in the suede. But you have this fleshy situation on the back. So this has got to be the very bottom layer of the leather. And then you're going into the center of the flesh, the grain.
Yeah, the
grain.
areas.
And so then you're going to get, after that, they can take another split off of it. And then you can get this split.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. Especially with an American hide, our steers are heavier. I feel like we let them,
They are, because they're older when they get
yeah.
dead.
They die of old age.
Not so much, but
Yeah,
We-
that's all we have is old age leather.
That's all that we carry. They've lived a nice long life. Well, so then you'll take, after you get this split, then you could possibly, depending on the thickness of the hide, you might be able to get a really nice consistent suede from the middle section.
yeah, especially like with a bull or
Mhm.
something like that, or a large
All
old
right.
dairy cow.
Yeah.
I've got a question. You need to educate me right now.
This moment.
I've always understood
Not sure
that
that's
what you have
possible.
in your hand right there, Kevin, is it what they call a full side split.
Yes.
This is a
right?
double butt.
Okay, a double butt split then, but it is just a split leather. And I've always understood that suede actually goes through more of a process than just a regular split. It gets refined and buffed,
Yeah.
where it's just really buttery soft. Am I correct?
Yes.
So that is not necessarily suede.
Well, it's been sueded.
Okay.
This is a split that has been sueded, or it's a sueded split. There's a lot of leathers that are splits.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lot. Matter of fact, many leathers. This
Well, I was gonna say a lot of these coated ones are probably also a split
They
that's
are
had a coating
splits.
applied. Yeah.
But people don't realize that. They just think, well, that's leather.
Yeah.
But the reason they can use a split, which saves the tannery money, is because it's just exactly that. It's a split. It's less expensive. They put some money into finishing it, and it becomes a usable article.
Well, it's basically a byproduct that they've made a usable article out
Yes.
of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Think shoes.
Yeah.
Well, and especially so when you're talking about suede, and you can see with the example of that full hide, a lot of suede, we do get some full sides of suede, but towards the neck, it gets, because the fibers of the leather are so loose towards the neck, you don't have really good structural integrity in a suede when it's a full side. So a lot of times you will get a double butt because that is the densest grain on the
Yeah.
hide. They'll take the belly off, they'll take the shoulder and the neck off, and then they'll make that double butt
Yeah, it's
suede
taking the
part.
center out of a full hide. 'Cause
Correct.
It's the best part.
Yeah, so you get a nice tight grain. It's not flaky. It's not going to tear on
Well,
you.
and also you've got to take into consideration with suede, you got all these fibers.
Mhm.
You know, they're loose, and this is dyed. This is dyed all the way through. That's not a simple thing.
Well, maybe we should talk about suede dyeing also, and the fact that because there's no grain anymore, suede is almost always going to crock on you, which means lose its color.
Well,
It's
it
really
won't
hard.
it doesn't. I don't know if almost always is the right term, but
Right.
many times,
Yeah, it's hard to.
especially if you get it wet,
Yeah,
you rub your hands on it and it comes off green. Now this does not do that, I don't think.
but
Maybe a
it's-
little.
It's a little bit, but if it
Very
was
little.
black, you would definitely have black on your hands.
Yeah, but if you use this in a product, normal wear, it's not gonna come off. Now, if you can make a handbag out of that, if you just want a green handbag, that's something you do.
It is. I do have a green handbag, as a matter of fact.
You can spray that with Scotch Guard,
Mm-hmm.
and that will pretty much solve the problem. But there's some leathers out there that they went on that pallet over there.
The palette.
The pallet. And the reason they went there is because there's too much pigment on that suede. So you had a choice. Try and take the pigment off, not a happening deal. Or put it on the pallet. And then wait for somebody like Kevin to come in and say, I need some really inexpensive leather that I can put in an ugly bundle, and I don't want to pay nothing for it, like a quarter, a foot. We got just what you need, Kevin. Now the leather kind of bleeds off on you. Okay, I get that, but with the tremendous variety of customer base that we have, we're able to take some of that leather and advertise it in such a way like this would make a great liner for the inside of a belt that you're gonna cover with 2 layers of leather. You could do that. If you wanted to make certain products out of it, you could, but you'd have to rub it down with a cloth and then spray it with Scotch Guard if you're gonna have an exterior use.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this is really ugly, and we don't know what in the world you'd ever do with it, but you can have it for 60
It's
cents
cheap.
a foot. Yeah. And people will, there's customers that can use that
Yeah.
kind of thing. They'll buy it.
I will say though, I mean, we've looked into the crocking situation on suede quite a bit, just because it is one of the biggest issues that somebody that's not used to working with suede will have. They'll make a project, they don't really understand the qualities. But I went to like Coach's website, and they had a couple products made out of suede, and they have that disclaimer on there. They're like, you know, if this is black or whatever color suede it is, this could rub off. It is just a thing to know when you're working with suede. It is very, very hard to get suede to be color fast. And like even like the back of a piece of leather, because that is the flesh side,
Yeah.
it is still difficult to get that to be super color fast. The front could be really color fast because they could put a heavy finish on it. You know, you have the grain just reacts differently to the dye and a solid finish than a suede does. So after
suede's weird.
suede, we go into a grain, but a buffed grain in a Nubuck.
Yeah, now I'm glad you went there, because Nubuck is the next thing up from suede, and it's got a grain on it, like you said.
But they probably used leathers with a Nubuck that had
Some issues,
had imperfections.
surface issues.
Yeah,
The leather's fine.
yeah. So they're gonna get it out of their dehairing pits, and they're gonna check it out. They may even start the process a little bit, and then it'll go through a grading process at whatever tannery it's at, and they're gonna be like, hey, this leather needs to go through this route here in the tannery because grain issues, but we're gonna make a Nubuck out of it.
Yeah.
Or we're going to make a pigmented leather out of it. And so they're going to start calling their herd pretty soon after the tannery process to shovel it into
The humor
whatever.
here, it just deteriorates over time.
I've learned a lot from you over
Culling
the years.
your herd.
Well, because if you do a full aniline finish, you're going to see every bit of that hide. You're going to see all the bug bites. You're going to see all the fat wrinkles, which y'all need to embrace the fat wrinkles in
Makes
your
it
leather.
pretty.
It makes it pretty. I just don't understand people that don't like a good fat wrinkle.
I don't
I don't get it.
Like a
Y'all are
good
crazy.
fat
You and I are in agreement there.
Thank goodness.
I mean, I don't like some fat wrinkles, but
Wasn't talking about on you. I was
Yeah,
just talking
well.
about the leather.
so anyway, going back to Nubuck, and you mentioned the grading.
Yeah.
Most all grading is based on surface issues.
Correct.
You can have a grain issue where that's pretty ratty looking, or you can have a scar or scratch or whatever else. But in reality, 99% of customers are better served to buy a lower grade of leather, because most of them, not all, most, can work around that stuff. I mean, especially in veg leather. If you're making knife sheaths or holsters, who cares if there's scratches on there? Put the scratch on the inside back of the flap that goes over.
Exactly.
So anyway, you still have the fat wrinkles on the Nubuck, which is nice. And Nubuck is highly water resistant.
Is it?
Yeah, which is very nice. You pour water on there, it'll run off like water off a duck's back. Not all. I mean, some of it, you're going to see spots when you.
We could test that out. I did that one time. I did not win the test. There's a bottle of water over there. Oh, Kevin's going to use his tea. Hold on. Oh, yeah, it just beads right up.
Sits there.
Yep. Look at it go. Gone. You guys will just have to trust us because we didn't show you.
Anyway, it works. So not all Nubuck is super resistant, but Nubuck works great for shoes, works great for chaps, works great for bags and everything else.
Plus,
Upholstery.
it feels really nice.
It does feel
It
good.
has, it's like you just clip your fingernails and run over it. It feels good.
This is.
That's a
I
weird
hope you were-
analogy.
I
And
hope
so-
you were going to the next step up.
Yeah. So after a Nubuck, this is just a buffed, correct?
Yes.
Isaac, you want to go to 4?
Oh, yeah. You can really see it. Well, I can see it from where I'm looking. You know, you take your fingers across this. This is so lightly sanded
Mm-hmm.
that it's almost hard to imagine. Very lightly sanded. But when you run your fingers on it one way, you can see those marks. When you run your fingers on it the other way, they go away, or you can't see them.
Yeah. Well, I may have brought in the wrong color, but
This is my least favorite leather. The reason for it is it's charcoal in color. I'm not a particular fan of charcoal, and I have 27 tons of it.
That's your least favorite
That's
part.
my least favorite. Yeah.
just specifically this one piece of leather, we have a lot of it. So why would somebody buff it instead of straight up go all the way to a full Nubuck?
There's all kinds of leather working manufacturers, customers. The big deal, not all, but the big deal is shoes. Shoes and boots.
Yep.
This is one tough leather. Extremely tough. And
What makes a buffed grain tougher than a full grain, or just, I guess, different?
well, it doesn't have to be. I guess maybe I should have said this particular leather is really tough. When you run a knife through it, it kind of screeches, you know, because it's so cotton picking dense. And it's what they do to it to get that buffing to be able to take. Because you really, I mean, you can buff this and end up with a Nubuck finish, but to buff it and come up with a firm leather that'll make shoes, see, that's not going to make shoes.
Right.
But this will, because it's got that, it's what, 4 to 5 ounce, and it's firm, and you can bend it, shape it, and all that
And the
other
hold.
stuff. Yeah, and they've got to process that leather to get that leather that way, and whatever it does, it makes it tough.
Yeah.
I haven't sat and watched them do that.
They must compress it somewhere.
I would think so. And typically,
Oh, well, maybe that's why it makes it tougher. Is they're compressing it and then they buff that surface, but
Probably
it's
so.
it's way less prone to scratch because of how compressed it is.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys heard that, but I could hear it.
Yeah, I'm sure you could. It just is. It just sounds tough.
Yeah.
Well, here, maybe do that again over here. Cut it one more time, but in this area, and I won't talk.
One of you guys want to note the date here? Okay. You can hear it?
Yeah.
And
It sounded tough.
yeah,
That's a sharp knife too. That's a razor blade knife that you probably stropped over and over again.
well,
Or
it's
just-
pretty sharp, that's for sure.
He just pops off a new one when he needs it.
So anyway, Nubuck brushed leather.
Well, so let's talk about that a little bit too, because there is also the like glass slicking. A lot of these finishing facilities have huge like
Oh.
heat presses where they
Yeah.
slick the leather.
It's where they use hammers.
Yeah.
And depending on the leather that you're wanting to slick or compress, like what's that? What are those called? The round
Those
things.
shell cordovans.
Shell cordovan.
Yeah.
I watched Skip Horween do those things. Did you get to watch
I
that?
haven't. Mm-mm.
There's a hammer. It looks like a 4x4 that's about maybe 4 feet long, and it's kind of curved, and it comes down, and it's got a glass slicker that's been anchored to that 4x4. And that stupid thing, if you can imagine, like this would be the 4x4, and the slicker is hanging down here. And this hammer comes down and goes whack, boom, whack, boom, with a ton of pressure. And it is flat out scary. You don't want to stand too close to that thing for obvious reasons. I mean, you could end up minus equipment. And I'll tell you, the people there that are running that, man, they're so good with that. But that just compresses that leather, and it makes that shell cordovan beyond compare for shoes and other leather goods.
What's the exotics tannery down in Georgia? They do the gator hides.
The Snapping Turtle Company?
No,
Oh,
not the Snapping Turtle Company.
Yeah, I know who you mean.
Anyways, they're I know who they are. Why can't I think? In any case, they have a video, and I think that they have an agate head slicker
Yeah.
that they use on their machines to slick whenever they're doing the high gloss finishes on the gator skins.
Same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So anyway, there's all kinds of processes, and there's still, that process is in use today. In countries like Germany, they use these humongous hammers that come down and they figured out how to make a certain kind of leather for a certain customer or a certain customer base, and that's why change it if it's successful.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some coated leathers real fast. So we've got a patent, we've got a foil, and then we just have this fully pigmented cowhide situation. So most of these have probably been done on splits.
Okay, this is done on a split.
Yeah.
And this is referred to as a foiled leather.
Foiled. You want to go to 4, Isaac?
They take gold foil,
American tanning.
they laminate it to the top, and boy, let me tell you, that stuff is on there.
Yeah.
Trying to get that stuff off is an exercise in futility. Now, there are foiled leathers that have been manufactured and they made a mistake. They didn't get the heat right when they put it on the leather, or they didn't do something right. There was a bolt laying on the table when they tried to iron it.
Didn't we have a problem at one time, someone had rolled that inside out? And it made all the foil wrinkle on the.
Yes, but that's not a problem with the foiling. That's a problem with the leather. That's called, when that happens, I don't think I have any leather. Oh, here, this would be able to show you. If you roll this, I think you can see it. If you roll this leather the wrong way, it's probably easier to see on a piece of veg.
Yeah.
You know, but if you roll the leather the wrong way and leave it or too tightly, you get these little bumps and wrinkles.
You know what that's called?
Where the grain.
Piping.
Piping. I have some hermeneutic.
Oh.
Where the grain actually separates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
The grain comes off the
But see,
flesh below.
I don't know if that's going to do it.
Yeah. So you can see when you
Yeah.
get all of that, that's called piping. And that is, and it can happen a lot when you have a very, very thick hide, like
Those vertical
a piece of saddle skirting,
wrinkles.
or in the specifically the bridle leather that Herman Oak makes. If you roll that too tight with the grain in, it will crack that finish and cause piping of the grain.
Yeah, so in
Most
reality, the split that you use to put the foil on needs to be a pretty decent split.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's not, you're going to get that, could get that piping.
And so you've got a foil, you've got a patent, which is plastic, guys.
A lot of this leather is referred to as PU. Poly,
Urethane.
yeah, polyurethane split. They've taken the split and covered it with polyurethane. And it's basically the same as the foiled leather, except that it's a petroleum product that goes on the top. And you can have the same problems, but again, they make it.
Well, okay, so there is a coated split with the patent, but then you also just have a PU leather that's like a reconstituted, leather dust that they've mixed with a glue and then created leather, but it is no longer a it's not even a split
composite
anymore.
product.
A composite, yeah. And we don't typically carry any of that.
No, the only
nuggets.
reason we would have that.
Chicken nuggets.
But the problem is that the leather is made, it happens at a tannery, and all tanneries have that pallet.
Pallet.
They have more than one pallet. They
Yeah.
have several. So anyway, that's the reason that we would end up with some.
Yeah. They just wait
Yeah.
for guys
Or,
like you.
so there's also like a heavily pigmented finish that can be put on a split. Sometimes it is put on a full grain leather. You can have a full grain pigmented finish. But that is where they have taken a solid layer of paint. You no longer see the characteristics of the hide. You can't see through the leather. It still looks like a piece of leather, but you don't, there's no really fat wrinkles anymore. You don't see the grain, where like this one, you see the characteristics. This is just
Yeah, and this is far less expensive to produce than this.
correct.
Because here the dye has to penetrate the leather. Actually, it has to penetrate. That's struck through,
This
even
is
though
not.
it looks white in the middle. It's still struck through because the back is.
It's not struck through because it's
Oh.
dyed on the top and the bottom, but not all the way through.
You're right.
I know.
I stand corrected. I look
okay.
too quick.
Well,
But
so, and
anyway,
that's-
this is more expensive to produce than this.
Right.
So there's a lot of leather that's produced like this.
Yes.
You know where it
A lo-
goes?
automotive.
Hmm?
Automotive.
A lot of automotive, a lot of furniture, and a lot of shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And the leather that's on the furniture that's on sale, there's a good chance that it's pigmented.
Yep.
Maybe not completely, but
Well, and I know a lot of furniture companies, they've gone to doing like a partial leather, partial vinyl situation. So anything you could touch is probably some sort of a leather, whether it's a high-end, more in Giles upholstery leather, or whether it's a pigmented, cheaper, finished
that's
split.
why you see
and
the
then mixed
cowboy
with the
boots
vinyl.
for $29.95 a pair.
Yep.
Is because it's pigmented leather, and it is what it is.
Well, let's talk about the dyeing all the way through and
I
the
thought
different.
We had a piece that this is.
I mean, yes, that's all the way through. This is probably dyed all the way.
Yeah,
Well,
looks
it has
like
a
it.
little bit of a crust line. So, for the boot industry, kind of more specifically, when you have these thicker oil tans, so most of your upholstery leathers, it's hard probably to not dye it all the way through because it's like 2 to 3 when it goes in the drum. Like
Well,
it's
they
really
They
thin.
lay it out on this giant table, and these big circular
They could spray it.
sprayers spray them.
Yeah. But you'll put a piece of leather, and especially if you're a 4-5, 5 to 6, you'll put your leather in the drum, and you will start to dye it. You'll put the dye in there, and it'll start to go. And the longer you leave it, the farther the dye penetrates. But that also changes the characteristics of the leather,
Right.
changes the look that you get. And so a lot of times, especially with a boot leather, you are going to see this crust line that runs down the center. So the back will be dyed and the front will be dyed, but the center will still be that wet blue color.
Normally, when they do this is sprayed. They'll lay it out on that big table and just goes really fast automatically, and then they'll turn it over and spray the back. But like you said, leather can be dyed through, and you can still see some of the color. It just didn't quite go all the way
Or
through.
yeah, it's just a different tone.
This is, I just want to talk about, this is amazing.
I love. So this is our Mad Dog,
Dog
goat. And it starts in Africa. So it's an African goat, and they do a pre-tanning process, and then it goes to England to be finished. And this is specifically for the boot industry.
Yeah, I think there's only one, I think Tusting and Burnett.
I
is
think
the
so.
only
Yeah.
company
Isaac,
in the
you wanna go
world
for?
that makes this stuff. And they have to use that Nigerian goat
Yeah,
for whatever, hair sheep.
hair sheep. And it is so beautiful. And this is a full aniline. You can see every characteristic of the skin of the goat in
And
this piece of leather.
This is designed to be buffed.
Mhm.
In other words, they'll make their shoe or boot or whatever, and it'll look kind of crappy, maybe. But when you take that product and hold it to a buffing wheel and you buff that up, you start to see down into that stuff. Oh, gosh, that's gorgeous.
Okay, Liz has mentioned aniline several times. What is aniline? What are you talking about?
Well, it's a dye.
A type of dye?
Yes.
Yeah. So an aniline, it is maybe like a transparent dye. Would that be the best way to put it?
That's probably the best way of.
Because like a pigment is paint, so you have kind of like this dye that you can. The color is there, but you can still see through it. So just like you would
It's-
dye a piece of veg.
It's kind of like a Phoebing's dye
Hmm.
in yellow or red. To get a really like yellow is probably a good example because you can see through it. Black, you can kind of see through it, but it's got a ton of pigment in it, just a ton. And so do other colors like red and blue and what have you. But This doesn't have as much pigment. There's still quite a bit. They've got to take it off, you know, because if you don't, it's not going to be happy. But that's why it gets buffed. This is, oh, I just like to cut it. That is
Kevin likes to cut leather.
And man, that just goes all the way through.
Mhm.
You already did that, didn't you?
I did. I was checking to
Man.
see. Because I do feel like, and so maybe in this particular hide, they applied the dye and then they're buffing it off, right? In this one, they're leaving that crust line, whether they spray it or put it in a drum, I don't know which, but they leave that crust line because then you get a pull-up. You get where the lighter color from the inside of the leather shines through. So as you bend it, as you make your boot, you are actively getting a lighter color as you go.
And you get it through here,
Yeah.
you know.
But this, I mean, this is dyed all the way through. You have,
Yes, but you still get the pull-up.
you still get the
pull-up.
pull-up.
Is a lighter blue.
Mm-hmm.
And some
Yeah.
of these are not sprayed. I don't have a way of knowing.
I did email SB Foot, and I'm hoping to hear back. I haven't heard back yet about kind of the specific of their process and
Well, some of
why.
them, you know, will take leather like this, and man, it goes to the guy on the table, and he's got a sponge, and he's just wiping it on there.
Well, so about that, this is probably one of the most highly finished leathers that we carry, and it's one of our high embossed croc leathers. These are hand finished, just like you
Yeah.
just talked about. So there's probably a base coat that goes on. They go onto a crust. It might even be a semi-veg crust in order to get the amount of embossing. What do you think? Or do you think it's a full chrome?
No, well, I think this is full chrome, but it can be what
A
you said.
partial veg?
Yes. Yeah, there's all kinds of reasons for, you know, the customer dictates everything to the tannery.
Yeah.
And they dictate durability issues, they dictate looks, colors, all kinds of things. And that's what's going to determine whether it's a partial veg or not.
Yeah.
You can take a complete veg leather and you can do this, emboss it, tan it. It's going to be more expensive because veg chemicals are more expensive and the process is more expensive than
Yeah.
chrome. This is gorgeous. The only, man, they did a
This is a fantastic piece
this
of
is
leather.
a great job. But the way they get these tips is the guy takes a perhaps a block of wood with a cloth wrapped around it, and he gets dye on it, and he blots it off, and he's got to be really good. He's got to be skilled because he takes that block of wood and starts. That's a. If he gets too much dye on there, you got a piece of gator with a blop.
A bloppy gator.
You don't want to have that. So he probably would start here. Look at that. When you're here real close, can you see? Well,
You could go to 4.
that's different than this.
Is it a little bit of metallic?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's where there's more pigment left than there is. Well, it's still here, but maybe not
Well,
as much.
I feel like they went over with a brown, like a dark brown, and then they go over it again with a gold
Yeah.
to tip the top of it. So they're doing multiple layers. So these are all hand finished. Anytime you see any of these kind of situations, somebody they've probably sent it through a base dye. So maybe this yellow was
Yellow.
the base, and then somebody hand finishes the whole rest of the hide. And these
Yeah.
do come in whole hides.
Yeah, they might have taken this yellow piece of leather, and once it was yellow
Mm-hmm.
and not embossed, they might have taken, and they probably did. They took that dry sponge and they colored it all that color. Just went over it, and they hit nothing but the natural high spots. And really doesn't matter how good a job they do on that because you know
You
it's,
get the modeling.
yeah,
and
and
it's
they can
good.
do it more here. They can do that part with a little heavier application.
But if it hasn't been embossed yet, they don't know where that is.
Well, that's true. So after that color, then they would emboss it probably.
Okay.
And once they've got it embossed, it makes it easier to hit those tips and what have you. But it's like you said, this could be, I think there's several colors there.
There's at least 4.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Plus a gloss and a metallic, maybe.
Could be.
Just
That's why it's $10 a foot.
That's why it's $10 a foot. Yeah. And then the back is this nice crusty color, you know. So They do all of their finishing on the front.
That is so nice.
It's a beautiful one.
It's $11 a foot.
I think if you buy enough of it, it might go down to $9.
Well, now let's look at that one over there. That's yeah.
This one. Show me some of those lammy goat situations. So this is an embossed leather, but it hasn't been finished.
Yep. And this wasn't perfect, and that's another thing about embossing. You know, you can use a piece of leather that's just not perfect, because embossing can cover up a multitude of sins, and especially if you're going to dye it like that.
Right.
So they may spray this, for instance, they may spray it yellow. They've embossed it first, but they may spray it yellow, and that's fine. When you do that, when you spray dye something, you leave areas that just don't get the same amount of dye as other areas.
Yeah.
And when they dye leather, it makes a difference as to the angle that the dye is shot onto the leather. You know, if you have your machinery set up to spray, like if this is a dye gun, you go like this, it's different than if you go like this.
Right. Especially if it's already embossed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you're making a really cool piece of leather, to have it set up either spraying from one side or the other or from top to bottom, you get this shadowing effect.
Yeah, like the sun shining
Yeah.
at different times of day.
Exactly. You're not as dumb as she says.
Yeah. Oh, in some ways I'm worse.
So
Well,
let's.
think we all
I
are.
brought in this piece also. So this is a little lambskin that has been perforated, and we do get quite a bit of perforated leather, and most of that is either for automotive. Automotive uses a decent amount of perforated leather, or the fashion industry.
This is amazing.
I don't even understand.
It's a garment. It's European. You know, that's another thing that a lot of people in this country don't understand.
I mean, between that and this,
There's a world
Isaac, can you go to 4?
that's called, part of a world that's called Europe.
Part
There's
of the
a
world is
country
Europe.
called Russia.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people aside from the United States. There's this little place called China. You know, they wear leather coats and shoes and garments and suits and all kinds of stuff. And Germany, and when you go to those places, you see this stuff. You see it on a lapel. You see it on a hood. You see it on all kinds of fashion.
Like this is a calfskin, Kevin.
I don't know. My guess would, yeah,
Calfskin.
it is.
So they have lasered this calfskin, and cut these
Yeah,
lines
this has
into
hair
it.
on it. If
Yeah.
you can't see it, you probably can't. That's a hair-on calf.
You can kind of see some of it sticking out there. And like they'll do so many different patterns where they've lasered out the hair in different ways. They'll laser croc patterns into it. They'll laser all the way through it and do perforated with the laser. It's all sorts of these crazy, and they do it with lamb and goat and calf. Well, you'll get these really wild.
Well, this was done with a roller that has little bitty knives, for a lack of a better term. And they roll this under there, and it almost takes two people, because you don't want a wrinkle while you're doing this. And that roller will have knives spaced every inch apart or 2 inches apart, and then it'll have knives every half inch apart. So you get this break in your pattern. And they'll roll it under there, and some guy's holding it on the back, and the other guy's
sounds
holding
terrifying.
it on the front, feeding it through there. Pardon?
I said that sounds terrifying.
It is terrifying. You do not want your hand
No.
to go through that.
Well, so I was thinking, so like this specific piece of leather, this probably went through a roller. But this one that you just had, there was a section because it was
They-
a plate.
yeah,
and you can
they-
see where the embossing
right.
repeated.
They will either, like
Right here.
Herman Oak, when they emboss, and they do emboss things,
They have plates.
they have plates, big
Yeah.
4 foot by 4 foot plates, and squish. Boy, you don't want your hand under that either,
Nope.
because it'll flatten it out a little. And,
Probably won't have many
It'll
bones
make it
left.
big.
and some of these are, like you said, rollers. Now,
Huge rollers.
think about how much a roller costs.
I mean, yeah, our belt rollers are like $1,000 to do
A little
1.5 by 8.5 inches. Can you imagine the roller that it takes to do a whole hide? This comes as a whole hide, and they
I mean,
roll
I would
it
guess,
all the way through,
I would just be guessing, but I would say between $70,000 and $100,000.
probably. And then to get different patterns, you have to buy one of those for every single option you have. So if you want to emboss ostrich, if you want different styles of gator, if you want different styles of floral.
And it's got to
Does it-
be done right,
Yeah.
because you've only got so much roller pattern.
Right, somebody has to draw it.
So you want it to come out evenly every
Mhm.
single time, instead of 6 inches between the belly and 5 inches between it next time. You don't want that.
Yeah. Well, guys, it's noon. Have we talked
Really?
about all the things? Yeah, it
I
goes
get
real
to go,
fast.
what's this?
Oh, well, that's a shrunken situation, which
I like that.
I know. That's why I grabbed it, because it's cool.
It is, and that's a lambskin.
But you can get, like, you'll get some shrunken
Or a
bison
kid.
sometime. Mm-hmm.
And this is probably a good last point to make.
You go to 4.
You can, you can make whatever kind of leather you want to make out of almost any kind of leather. You can take the nastiest old piece of cowhide, and you can turn it into the softest, squishiest garment leather that you can possibly imagine. You can take the a lamb skin that's 2 ounces at the most, and turn it into something that's firm and 3 to 4 ounces.
How'd they do that?
But they do that in the tanning process.
Yes, yeah.
Because people always call up and say, I've got this piece of cowhide and it's really stiff. How can I make it really soft?
Well, there's some things you can do, but it so much depends on the application of what they're doing, why they want it to be softer, how much softer do you want it to get. That's the benefit of people like you who are really old. You've got all that wonderful experience.
You'll be as old as me someday, Kevin.
Yeah, I know.
Aren't you guys like months
Probably in
apart?
another month.
Okay.
But anyway,
But yeah, a shrunken grain is really awesome, and this goes into a heated drum for probably long time. I don't know how long it takes. We could.
and this is
Ask
either
Tom
rolled
next
or
week.
pressed. Man, they flat out squish this.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as we're telling people, we're probably fortunate to have Denny, Liz, myself, and some others here. We've accumulated a huge amount of knowledge about leather over the years, and it's nothing that we did, really to get it. It's just the fact that we've had the privilege of going through tanneries. We've had the privilege of talking to all the people that run the tanneries. We've had the privilege of talking to people that have done nothing but tan leather for their whole life, for generations. And we've had customers come in that says, I bought this piece of leather and I tried to do this and that to it and it just didn't work. Okay, I'm smarter now.
Yeah, we've learned a lot from you guys making
Yeah,
mistakes
we
and
really
telling
do.
us about
And
them.
that's why we're careful in our replies.
Right, or why we ask a lot of questions,
Don't try to dye your couch unless you really, 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 really want to bad.
unless you have then you know it's going to be a process.
Yeah.
You understand what you're about to take on.
Don't re-dye your jacket.
Yeah.
Unless you really, 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 really want to, and you don't care about the jacket.
You're okay if you don't have a jacket at the end.
If you don't care about the outcome,
Yeah.
go for it.
We sold leather. I tried to not sell leather to a lady from Montana
Yeah, how'd
because
that
she
go?
was bound and determined she's going to dye her couch. She loves that couch, but if it don't work, I don't care. I'm going to do everything I can to make it work. I told her, okay, here's what you got to do, and here's why you have to do it. She got a toothbrush and took all the finish out of down in those seams with acetone, and she worked on it and worked on it and scrubbed on it and did everything she could possibly do, and she dyed that couch with that Phoebe's black dye.
Mm-hmm.
She said, it is wonderful. I love it.
I had a guy on retail, when I was working out on retail, he did the same thing, and I was like, sir, this is a huge project. He had a 3-piece set that he wanted to redo, and he did it. I think he went through all of our dye remover, and then I just told him to go to Lowe's and get some acetone, because that was going to be cheaper, because he just kept coming back in, and I was like, you're going to spend all your money on dye remover. But it took him all summer, I think, to redo his couches, and he worked on it a little bit at a
He
time.
got what he wanted.
He got
was
what he
proud of
wanted.
what he did, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's why it scares me to death when I'm on the retail floor, and some lady comes in and one of our employees is out there and says, "I'd like to re-dye my purse. Can you show me what I need?" Oh my gosh, it just petrifies me.
Just buy a new purse.
Yeah, let me show you the dye, lady. Oh.
Well, and people always, they have a spot on their couch that's faded, or the cat's got to, or whatever.
Yeah, and they just want to put a little
Yeah,
bit of dye, but they don't realize
I just
that.
need to dye this one little
Yeah,
part.
or their car seat,
Yeah,
same way.
or a hole. I mean, we'll walk you through anything, but we don't guarantee any outcomes.
Did you say it was noon?
I
oh,
did.
it's past noon.
It is.
Good heavens.
Culver's is gonna close.
I know, Chevy said something about, Culver's is calling.
Yes, it is.
So, alrighty, folks. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, in-house guests from the good old state of Mississippi, for coming in. It's been fun. Hope you learned something today.
Bye.
Bye, guys. We'll see you next week.
I won't.
Oh, that's right.